yet because I know that we need to catch a flight.
Συγγνώμη, καθίστε κάτω, λίγο καθίστε κάτω. Συγγνώμη, λίγο κάτω. Κάτω λίγο.
Of the conference, and especially with an emphasis on the topic that you addressed. And also if you want to pose some additional questions for discussion at the, here at the round table, even after you leave the round table, so in your absence, or if we find time, if we have time in your presence.
Well, I guess something we were talking about this morning, because Marcus and I were having a discussion. Something I was thinking at that discussion was that I liked about these Delphi dialogues, the talks we've been having, is that we haven't been talking very much about artificial general intelligence. And in particular, we haven't been talking so much about the kind of perspective that these technologies are going to, of how these technologies are going to affect future generations. And I always worry when we talk about future generations instead of all the people there are on this planet here and now, and when we talk about the well-being of future generations instead of the people that we have here, I always worry about that. But I suppose in a way I have to worry also therefore about when we talk about alien species, instead of talking about people who are on the planet here and now. And also I was thinking when Lord Rees was talking about how we may end sending a great many humanoids and robots off to other planets and populating those planets, I was thinking how that's fine, but I wish that those robots were over here, perhaps doing things to foster and protect the planet that we already have. So I suppose it was a kind of, what I wanted to suggest is that how important it is to prioritize humanity, today's humanity, and today's planet, the one we have now, when we talk about artificial intelligence. And I think that has been one of the valuable things about that discussion, to approach it from that perspective.
Thank you so much, Helen. This is extremely wise, and so this will be one, I think, of the focus of our discussion at the round table. Now I would like to ask the Director of the European Cultural Center of Delphi, Andreas Kofas, to say a few things, to share his thoughts with us.
Thank you, Panayotis, and thank you everybody for your presence yesterday and today, and of course to our wonderful panelists for the thoughts that they shared with us. I was planning to speak in Greek, actually, but given that not everybody on the panel has a headphone, I will continue in English.
Μπορείτε να φέρετε τα...
That's okay, it's okay.
Because, I know that one of our participants at the round table most probably will speak in Greek, so we need the headphones.
Okay, while you bring headphones for the later intervention, I will talk in English. So we have reached the end of our proceedings, and this is usually the moment where someone attempts to summarize, to gather the threads, draw conclusions, deliver something coherent. I will not do that. And I will not do that because I think the place where we find ourselves reminds us of something important. That the value of a conversation is not measured by its capacity to produce conclusions, but by its capacity to make the right questions unavoidable. That is exactly what the Oracle was. Not an institution of answers, an institution that turned answers into new questions. The frame of those 2 days has been the future of humanity. A question broad enough to become unmoored, unless you keep it tied to something specific. And here, the specific is this very place and its tradition. The Delphic tradition has 3 features that I think speak directly to our question. The first, institutionalized ambiguity. Most institutions, ancient or modern, are built around certainties. The Oracle was structurally different. It did not give you the answer. It returned to you the responsibility of thinking. This was not a weakness. It was a different conception of what knowledge means under conditions of uncertainty. What institutional forms, political, scientific, technological, are we capable of building around that logic today, rather than reaching for false certainties? The second, self-knowledge as a political act. Know thyself was not personal advice. When a city-state came to ask about war or a new colony, the ambiguous response forced collective self-examination. The Oracle was a mechanism for collective self-knowledge. Today, as artificial intelligence takes over, an ever greater share of the functions of judgment and prediction, who takes on that function? And what is lost if it disappears? The third, and perhaps the most unusual, the Oracle announced its own silence. It did not simply cease to function. In its final utterance, it declared its own ending, said that gods were departing, that the world was changing, that what had been would not return. I do not know many institutions in history that have done anything comparable, that have acknowledged from within their own limits and their own historicity. The question about the future of humanity is also the question: which of our institutions today are capable of that kind of self-awareness, and which are not? And what happens then? These are not questions to which I have answers. They are questions that this place obliges us to take with us when we leave. And perhaps that's the most valuable thing Delphi still has to offer. And on that final note, I give the floor back to Panagiotis and my colleagues.
Thank you, Andreas, for this very thoughtful intervention. Of course, I must say that here in Delphi, and especially the ones, you know, who are leaders of the European Cultural Center of Delphi, are allowed to offer idealized versions of the ancient oracle of Delphi. Okay, I'm not going to comment any further, but Andreas and I know that yeah. Okay, good. Thank you, Andreas. So
I can talk about the canonization of Delphi in the Western imaginary if you want me to, but yeah, I take your point.
Already in antiquity. Yes, so Professor Krimizis, I would like each one of the guests to the round table to take no longer than 4 to 5 minutes to share their ideas, their comments with us, and then the discussion will be open to all the speakers, you know, to all of you.
So those of us who work with NASA can't really talk in prose, but we use slides. A little bit closer. And I'm showing you this overview of what I had prepared, which is not all I'm going to talk about, but you see a figure that you may not understand, and that's our solar system as revealed by many, many missions that we have. And in terms of geography, the heliosphere is what we call the sun and the planets, and outside the boundary is the galaxy. Now, out there, we have, as we speak, 2 spacecraft called Voyager 1 and Voyager 2, and I've had the honor of being principal investigator on those for the last 50 years. And the distance that they have between here and the Voyagers is 25.4 billion kilometers, about 170 times as far from the sun as the Earth is. And it takes almost 24 hours, it will be 24 hours this November, for the signal with the speed of light at 300,000 kilometers per second to get to Earth. So you can imagine, it's the farthest spacecraft that our humanity has in the solar system. And I just wanted to show you where is the next sun. As you can see, is the Alpha Centauri. It's about 4.37 light years away. So that's the closest we are to another planetary system. I wanted to point out some of the perils of human spaceflight before I conclude. And that is, you see on top here, altered gravity physiological changes, balance disorders, fluid shifts, visual alterations, cardiovascular deconditioning, decreased immune function, muscle atrophy, bone loss. All of these things are observed, and we know about that from the space station and human space flight. And there is space radiation. There is distance from Earth. What if somebody gets ill? How are they going to be treated? And we're talking about long-term trips, because even going to Mars is about 8 months. It is not a very short time. Isolation and confinement, we're not even getting into that. Behavioral aspects of isolation. These are all from the NASA Advisory Council from over 10 years ago. None of these issues has actually been solved. There is nothing you can do about sending human crews on these kinds of trips without resolving these issues. So we're a long ways from that. So just to summarize then, compelling numbers. As Professor Lowe pointed out, we have, and Professor Rees, 4.6 billion years solars, the age of our solar system. But in terms of communication, it's only the last 100 years that we're able to tell the universe that we're here. That's because we invented electromagnetic waves, and they cannot see the TV shows of the last 100 years since the 30s. Statistical studies suggest up to 42 billion Earth-like planets in our galaxy. 42 billion, ladies and gentlemen. How many galaxies? 2 trillion galaxies in the universe, which means that about 10 to the 23 to the power 23 Earth-like planets. That's 1 with 23 zeros. So what is the probability of intelligent life elsewhere? I would say 100%. In 10 to the 23, there have got to be, we can't be unique. But distances are so vast, the diameter of the known universe is actually 93 billion light years. That, assuming current physical laws, which is the speed of light as a limit, 300,000 kilometers per second, we're unlikely to ever find out of the existence of alien intelligent life, unless, as Professor Loeb suggested, they send something to us. But Professor Rees said, what's the probability that the development of intelligent life in our solar system overlaps some other system in our galaxy, let alone the rest of the universe? That's a tough question. And so survival of spaceship Earth is our only hope for continuation of the human species. And I consider the pronouncements of Elon Musk and others about colonizing Mars and as midnight sun's dreams, nothing else. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Kabimizis. Now, I think it would be only fair if I would invite Professor Rees to comment on Professor Kabimizis' comments, since Professor Rees, we have not heard you so far. So I was wondering whether you could please comment on Professor Kabimizis' comments. We cannot hear you for some reason. Yes, please, we can hear you
now. This is Martin Rees from Cambridge. I don't know, can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you perfectly.
Yes, I'm afraid I was not very able to hear what you've been saying. The line is not very good. So honestly, just what I can contribute, I think you have probably heard a recording of some of my thoughts. And all I can say really is that I'm very sorry to have missed the rest of the meeting. I think I would have agreed with most of what was said, but I would like to say that I do think this century is very special and very dangerous, because for the first time we are so interconnected that disasters can cascade globally. Of course, I discussed, and I guess Professor Loeb also discussed, post-human evolution, and I think we should bear in mind that the Earth is less than halfway through its life. And if we think of how much can change in the next 100 years, think what can change in a time 1 million times longer than that. We've got no idea what might be out there. And we've also got no reason to believe that our brains can understand all the deepest aspects of reality. As I said in my talk, they have not changed very much since our ancestors lived on the African savannah, but it's amazing we have understood the world of the quantum and the world of the cosmos to some extent. But just as monkeys can't understand quantum theory, there may be lots of important aspects of reality that are quite beyond us, but by no means beyond other aliens and post-humans who may evolve. Just two other things which I would like to reiterate, which I said in my talk. I think we've got to bear in mind that even if there are no intelligent entities out there, if we don't screw up during this century, post-humans could spread through the galaxy and beyond. And that would mean it would be a cosmic disaster, not just a terrestrial disaster, if we were to wipe ourselves out now. So that's very important. But if there are aliens out there, and I think there probably are, and I know Professor Loeb thinks there are, I think we've got to bear in mind that they may be very different from us on Earth, and not little green men with eyes on stalks, something that we may not recognize. And I think it's more likely that post-human evolution will be electronic, not human. And I think that therefore means that we can't predict its motives or even if it's conscious. And there could be, as Mario Livio and I have suggested in the paper, lots and lots of entities out in space, brains thinking deep thoughts and contemplating, but not coming here, not being aggressive. Because we have evolved by natural selection, Darwinian selection, which favors aggression and gaining territory. But post-human evolution will be what I call secular intelligent design. And there's no particular reason why the intelligences would want to expand. They may be sitting out there thinking deep thoughts, but not wanting to reveal themselves to us. They may know we're here, but not want to come here. So that's my thought. And they may be out there. I think the context where I would disagree with what probably Professor Loeb said is I'm skeptical about having already seen clear evidence for any of these entities, but I do believe with him that they are out there. I think I did talk in my presentation about the in the next few decades, exploration, and I expressed a strong view that it is not a thing for humans to do, because as robots get better, the case for sending humans gets weaker. So I don't favor a program to send people to Mars unless they're privately funded. I don't think any government money should be spent on that. And but I do have a scenario where lots of robots can be sent to Mars. It'd be quite feasible for Mr. Musk, before he dies, to send several hundred robots in his spacecraft to Mars, and they would start walking around and doing things. They don't care about lack of atmosphere or temperature, and if he is as megalomaniac as we think he is, he might instruct them to build some huge mansion for him on a mausoleum for when he dies, and he's often said that he wants to die on Mars but not on impact, and so he could fulfill his vision. Good luck to him, but let's not waste any of our money on that. Sorry, I've gone on too long, but let me just say how sorry I was not to be able to listen in to the earlier sessions of the conference. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you for these wonderful comments. Of course, you'll stay with us during the roundtable discussion. And I must say that I'm very glad that very glad. I expected, rather, that, and I'm glad that my expectation has been confirmed, that your comments on Professor Avi Loeb's vision is rather double-tongued, like the Delphic oracle. So you agree with him to some extent, and of course, in other respects, you disagree with him. But Professor Loeb will comment later during the discussion. Okay, so we should move on to the other participants. Professor Mantzavinos, yes. Could you please say briefly a few things about yourself, and then please share your comment?
Yes, as I said yesterday, I'm a professor of philosophy at the University of Athens. And first of all, I would like to thank the organizers for the invitation. It was a great honor for me to be among such distinguished scholars and to be able to contribute to this discussion. I would like to make two brief comments. The first from the area of theoretical philosophy, the second from the area of practical philosophy. Let me start with the theoretical comment, which is of an epistemological nature. During the last 2 days, we have been discussing about the future of humanity, about our desires, how best to influence it, our fears about possible negative developments, and our hopes about the possibilities of human flourishing. But do we avail of scientific knowledge about the future of humanity? The answer is a clear no. There is no accepted scientific theory corroborated by enough evidence which delivers scientific predictions about the future of the human species. I think that it is important to remind us all that a series of grand attempts to discover historical laws or historical tendencies based on which one could scientifically predict the future of the human species have failed spectacularly. Just think of Marxism or the so-called theory of the end of history. It is, of course, the case that different scientific disciplines do shed some light on some aspects of the collective behavior of the human species, and that we have been able to discover some generalizations that are invariant under some specific constraints. But there is no scientific theory in the social sciences or in the life sciences which can provide scientific knowledge at a level of generality that could enable us to formulate scientific predictions about the future of humanity. And it is important to stress that our situation is not one of uncertainty, but of sheer ignorance. It is not the case that we are merely uncertain about the possible paths of humanity in the future or the probabilities that we can assign to the actualization of these paths. We ignore the possible paths and their probabilities. What are the reasons for this? I want to state just one: human creativity. One of the most astonishing properties of the human mind is its possibility to create novel solutions to problems ex nihilo. Genuine novelty is possible in all areas of human endeavor, and this very fact severely limits the possibility of prediction of the human affairs. A novelty that could have been predicted ceases to be a novelty. Epistemic humility is thus the appropriate stance. We should constantly be conscious of our ignorance about the concrete path of humanity in the future. What follows from this epistemic humility for practical action? And here I want to offer my second comment. Given the evolutionary nature of the human world, which is constantly confronting us with novel problems to be solved, the only thing that we can do is to foster the collaborative practices which will enable us to solve these problems as effectively as possible, despite our ignorance about the future. A general characteristic in the later parts of the human history has been the systematic reduction of our ignorance associated with the physical environment, due mainly to the progress of the natural sciences. However, the human environment is vastly more complex, mainly due to the creativity of human nature, and insofar we have to base any kind of actions that we want to undertake on a very limited knowledge of the social world. Does this mean that we should give up any kind of conscious attempts before even having started? No. What can we do? Design institutions, that is, the rules of the game of our interaction, in such a way that we can collectively experiment successfully with the solutions of the series of novel problems that we will be confronting in the future. Such institutions, appropriately designed at the local and global level, can help us move from the path that we will find ourselves at a moment of time that is undesirable to a new, more desirable path. Of course, the process of abandonment of one path does not include in itself its telos, its goal. The new path does not exist somewhere out there waiting to be discovered. On the contrary, every new path must be creatively constructed anew by modifying the existing rules of the game and by creating new ones. What remains thus is the consolation of political praxis. A political praxis based not on any pretense of knowledge about the future of humanity, but a political praxis forced to unfold in a genuine knowledge vacuum.
Okay, thanks, Professor Manzavinos. Clarification, and of course, perhaps this clarification is not needed. But these Delphi dialogues were not futurist, as you understand, okay? So we're not interested in how the future of humanity will be in, yes, decades or centuries from now, but how all these dramatically evolving changes, discoveries in technology, in the science, etc., appear to be shaping up aspects of the immediate future. Professor Papageorgiou.
Ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ για αποσεβασμό.
You may want to, first of all, Professor Papageorgiou, you should use the microphone, το μικρόφωνο, and the English speakers, please use the headphones. It's as simple as that.
Από σεβασμό στην θεματολογία την οποία θα επιχειρήσω στο σύντομο χρονικό διάστημα μετά από... Το όνομα μου είναι Λάμπης Παπαγεωργίου, είμαι ομότιμος καθηγητής του Πανεπιστημίου Αθηνών και διευθυντής του Ερευνητικού Πανεπιστημιακού Ινστιτούτου Ψυχικής Υγείας.
Της ψυχιατρικής. Κάποιοι μπορεί να τον χαβιάσουν. Especially futurists, perhaps, I don't...
Από σεβασμό στην θεματολογία που καλούμε να τοποθετηθώ, θα μιλήσω στη μητρική μου γλώσσα. Είναι συγκίνηση για μένα που βρίσκομαι σε αυτόν τον ιερό χώρο που βηματοδότησε και όρισε και ενδεχομένως ορίζει το δυτικοευρωπαϊκό τουλάχιστον πολιτισμό. Παναγιώτη, σε ευχαριστώ πάρα πολύ που μου δίνεις αυτή την ευκαιρία. Μας θυμίζω ότι ένα εισαγωγικό σχόλιο σε τούτο τον τόπο που είναι ο πλανήτης Γης. Και το λέμε πλανήτη γιατί πλανάται εξορισμού και κινείται σε τροχιά έλλειψης για να επιβεβαιώσει το ότι είναι σε πλάνο. Δεν έχουμε άλλο εργαλείο για να μειώνουμε αβεβαιότητα και να κερδίζουμε γνώση εκτός από την απορία. την απορία που άρθρωσε πρώτος ο προσοκρατικός Παρμενίδης και την κατά πάσα πιθανότητα τη διδάχθηκε ο Σοκράτης και όλοι οι σοκρατικοί διάλογοι αρθρώνονται με απορία. Δεν υπάρχει απάντηση εκεί και είναι άκρως σημειολογικό και σημαντικό. Σε τούτο τον τόπο εδώ λοιπόν οι άνθρωποι που είχαν και τότε αλλά και τώρα έχουμε απορία για το μέλλον μας ερχόντουσαν σε τούτο τον τόπο και εδώ είχε διαμορφωθεί εκείνη η συνθήκη που προσέφερε τους αμφίσιμους χρησμούς αλλά στη μετώπη, όπως έχει σχολιαστεί από τους εισηγητές, υπήρχε σε προστακτική έγκληση το γνώθις αυτόν και το μηδεάγαν. Φανταστείτε ένα τρίγωνο, στη μια κορυφή ο αμφίσιμος χρησμός που από πολλούς χλευάζεται. Δεν έχουν εννοήσει ότι στον πλανήτη που προείπαμε δεν έχουμε δύο ειδών προβλήματα για όλα τα θέματα. Εκείνα που δεν λύνονται και εκείνα που λύνονται. Χρέος μας να εντοπίσουμε τα άλυτα και να τα προσπεράσουμε, γιατί είναι ουτοπία το πεπερασμένο vitality να το βάζουμε στο πιθάρι των Δαναίδων. Δεν γεμίζει ποτέ. Αλλά όλα τα προβλήματα που λύνονται την έχουν τη λύση μέσα τους. Αρκεί να γίνει κατάλληλη συζήτηση. Όπως η συζήτηση Η πρόσκληση λοιπόν ήταν σαφής και στην βάσιμα υποσχόμενη συνθήκη να στρέψουν με τον αφήσιμο χωρισμό την προσοχή τους στο πρόβλημά τους και ταυτόχρονα με την προστακτική έγκληση γνώθης αυτών να έχουν επίγνωση των δυνατοτήτων και περιορισμών και ταυτόχρονα να εφαρμόζουν και το μέτρο. Κάτι που, γιατί όχι, έχει μια, για τη δική μου αντίληψη τουλάχιστον, επικυρότητα σε ατομικό και συλλογικό επίπεδο και για το σήμερα, για όλους μας. Σε αυτή τη λογική λοιπόν κινήθηκε ο Παναγιώτης και οι διοργανωτές και τους αξίζει για μένα εξαιρετικός έπαινος και κινούνται σε αυτή την κατεύθυνση. Οι πληροφορίες που κατατέθηκαν είναι πολυτιμότατες και για το θέμα του migration και για το θέμα της τεχνητής νοημοσύνης. Εκείνο που θα ήθελα να σχολιάσω μου θύμισε η όλη ιστορία που μας απασχολεί και συζητήθηκε εδώ με εξαιρετικό τρόπο, σε αυτόν τον ιερό τόπο, είναι η πρόταση του Εμμάνουελ Καντ να γίνει κριτική στον ορθό νου, der Kritik der reine Vernunft στα γερμανικά, κριτικ του καθαρού λόγου, και ταυτόχρονα, γιατί την περίοδο του διαφωτισμού οι πρόγονοί μας ήταν ενθουσιασμένοι το ίδιο ή περισσότερο από εμάς τώρα με την χρήση του AI, γιατί μπορούσαν να αντιθασεύουν τους νόμους των μαθηματικών, της φυσικής, της χημείας και να έχουν προϊόντα εξαιρετικής χρησιμότητας για την επιβίωσή τους. Ταυτόχρονα όμως πρότεινε την κοπερνίκια στάση. Μέχρι τότε πίστευαν ότι το κέντρο είναι η γη. Και ο Κοπέρνικος όταν πήρε τα δεδομένα και διαπίστωσε ότι δεν έβγαιναν τα συμπεράσματα που χρειαζόταν, άλλαξε τη στάση και θεώρησε ότι το κέντρο είναι ο ήλιος του πλανητικού συστήματος και τα αποτελέσματα οδηγήθηκαν σε πολύ χρήσιμα συμπεράσματα. Κατά αναλογία, λοιπόν, τολμώ να μας θυμίσω ότι είναι απαραίτητο να στραφούμε στον άνθρωπο, γιατί κατά τον Καντ και την κοπερνίκια στάση δεν είναι ο άνθρωπος που καλείται να προσαρμοστεί στα δεδομένα του που του προσφέρονται, αλλά τα δεδομένα ενιοποιούνται και κατανοούνται και την χάνουν χειρισμού που καταφάσκει στη ζωή όταν στα δεδομένα του υποκειμένου, δηλαδή στο χώρο, στο χρόνο, στη σχέση αίτιο αποτέλεσμα, αποκτούν ένα νόημα.
Ωραία. Σας ευχαριστούμε.
Ένα μικρό σχόλιο.
Μικρό
σχόλιο. Στην ίδια λογική, λοιπόν, με δεδομένο ότι ο άνθρωπος είναι το σύνολο των κυτάρων, όπως τα κύτταρά μας είναι και τα μυτοχόνδρια, τα οποία αιώνες πριν από μας ήταν ιοί που εισέβαλαν ή προσεκλήθηκαν από τα κύτταρα και πια προσφέρουν την ενέργεια, θα μπορούσε αυτό το παράδειγμα που μας προσφέρει η φύση να χρησιμοποιηθεί σαν οδηγός παράσταση για την ενοποίηση, έτσι, του δεδομένου, εκεί που εμείς το εννοούμε διχαστικά τεχνητή νοημοσύνη και άνθρωπος, παρά να το εννοήσουμε στην ίδια λογική όπως υπάρχει το κύτταρο με το μυτοχόνδριο. Σας ευχαριστώ πολύ.
Ευχαριστώ. Ambassador Krikoukis, a few words.
Thank you, dear President. Well, thank you first accepting me in the House of Lords, and why I come from the House of Commons.
As only Professor Rees is a lord.
I come from the House of Commons.
And he is not in this house.
With the end of this really unforgettable book, Δελφικοί, the first thing I would like to express is my profound gratitude to everyone I listened to, but also to those I didn't listen to, namely the interpreters. As an ambassador, I can never forget them. I cannot hide that the meetings here filled me with admiration and real emotion. A key observation is that the interventions were not characterized by conflicting positions, as I perhaps wrongly expected, but by a remarkable complementarity. This took us all further, and I do not hide it. It filled me not with fear, but with optimism for the future, or by restraint. Why restraint? Because I think that generative artificial intelligence functions like an endless treadmill. It allows each individual to progress faster, but collectively leads everyone to the same destination. Time pressure leads to accepting supposedly sufficient content at the expense of information quality. The more competent we deem artificial intelligence, the more passive we become, especially since artificial intelligence tends to tell us things we want to hear. So, it's not just us who through our laziness are becoming foolish or are becoming sheep, but the machine is too. Machine becomes the same. So, I think that we witness now an emergence of System 0, in addition to Systems 1 and 2, according to the modes of thinking of Daniel Kahneman, the famous psychologist. So, progressive standardization threatens our intellectual autonomy and our creative capacity. So there is a risk of diversity collapse, a photocopy of a photocopy scenario where artificial intelligence trains itself on its own output. The models gradually forget rare or infrequent data producing results that no longer reflect the heterogeneity of the original data. I thus see a risk of losing our culture, whether Greek, Slovenian, or German. Because we are, sorry to say that, witnessing a galloping emergence of American centrism in the field. Thus, we all have to strengthen our critical thinking, as artificial intelligence is a good servant, but a bad master. If artificial intelligence, for example, takes over junior tasks, how will we train the experts of tomorrow? Humanity, as you said, has to become once again a premium. Thank you.
Thank you, Ambassador Kavikoukis, and also Kavikoukis, among other things.
He helps the European Cultural Center of Delphi with its international relations, and we're most grateful to him. Now, how should we proceed? Yes, so I would like to pose perhaps a question that perhaps we would not have expected. A question to all the participants, which actually looks rather backward, but also focuses on the present. I would like to ask all of you how you think that in the last half of a century, humans and their societies have been shaped, and what does human mean today, let's say perhaps by contrast or not with what it used to mean half a century ago, and what should it mean in the near future? Okay, so this is half futurist, not futuristic, okay, and half historical, double-tongued again, like the oracles of the Delphi oracle. Okay, who wants to come? Yes, and also feel free also to comment on Professor Reese's, or perhaps even Professor Krimizis' comments.
Thank you. So traditionally, humans were the focus of terrestrial history books, where time is measured in years, the unit of time that it takes the Earth to revolve around the sun. And the reality of discovering both artificial intelligence, AI, and alien intelligence, which is also AI, over the next decade or so, marginalizes the centrality of humans on the cosmic stage. And the fundamental question is, how will we be remembered in the history books of the Milky Way galaxy or the cosmos at large, where time is measured in billions of years? That's the time it takes to have 5 revolutions of the sun around the center of the galaxy. The proper vision would be not about visiting nearby rocks like the moon or Mars, but of becoming an interstellar species. And we might be inspired to do so by discovering a visitor in our backyard. Now, what would be our own best interstellar ambassador? Rather than robots with AI made of silicon chips, it may be a product of synthetic biology. We could inspire to choose between those two depending on the qualities of our interstellar visitors. Self-replicating probes were conjectured by John von Neumann as a way of spreading an advanced civilization on a relatively short time scale. One interesting question that I have is, are we, humans, the von Neumann probes that an interstellar gardener planted on Earth? Because we are self-replicating and we are intelligent, and we use raw materials to expand beyond the Earth. Now, the search for answers already changes what it means to be human. We are shaped by our dialogues, which serve as our training data sets when we interact with other humans. But having a dialogue with AI changes the human brain and will have major effects on the human-human interactions as a result of that. So, and having a dialogue with aliens will surely have a deeper impact on humans than, because aliens have benefited from a much larger training data set than available on Earth. So the interactions with them would expand the human mind well beyond watching a Steven Spielberg extraterrestrial movie.
Avi, could I ask you a question on that? How could we be sure that they will be capable of discussing with us?
Well, developing a language would be a real challenge, and I think that would come as a result of a shared experience. If we spend some time with a visitor in a common environment, we will start developing names for things or interactions. And a Delphi dialogue with extraterrestrials would be a far more mind-expanding experience than a dialogue with AI, which is already different than a dialogue with a human. So definitely there will be, the biggest effect will be changing the way we are, what we define as humans, as a result of our interactions, because our interactions shape the way we think, our brain. Oh, yeah, and yeah, I very much agree with Professor Martin Rees on his perception of our future in science and technology, not necessarily going to Mars, but doing something different. And obviously we can get inspired to do the right thing by finding a sibling in our family that did the same before us, because we came to the cosmic stage relatively late.
Thank you. Anybody else? Yes, I think Professor Scott.
Yeah, I will directly. Yes, I will. I will directly respond maybe to Avi, because I was thinking previously, because he urged us to expand our knowledge towards, like interstellar thinking, towards aliens, and he said that we are somehow obsessed with some, forms of knowledge that are maybe too big, kind of, to get rid of with them. But we have some other possibilities of thinking about aliens. Like in my recent book, I have discussed the problem of the Neanderthal, in the William Golding's The Inheritors, which is written from the point of view of the Neanderthal. They regard Homo sapiens as aliens. And I think that, we still do not know if Homo sapiens, we have developed this AI now, and we are, the species that is the species of the universe, we think. But we all, of course, carry a certain percentage of DNA still of the Neanderthal and other species that were extinct. And I have argued, in a way, again, I will invoke the story of Jesus Christ, but not on a purpose, just it came out, that even Jesus Christ probably had a kind of 4% of DNA of the Neanderthal. And he might be, you know, in a way of if we believe that it is a cosmic Christ, he may be also close to them, you know, before they were extinct. Then another point that I think we should certainly expand into space, into interstellar, but there are so many things that are unknown, like gnotis auton phrase in our psyche, which was my topic. There are so many things that were not yet explored, starting with dreams, you know, even we have Jung and synchronicity.
Just going to mention dreams.
Yes, yes, and then following another chapter of my recent book was on telepathy, and I argued that somehow quantum physics, even if it's still not, of course, been proven that quantum physics could be transposed into physical kind of dynamics, but, you know, Karen Barrett, Catherine Keller, John Caputo, and of course I'm following these thinkers, I myself, we firmly believe that there is a link, of course, through synchronicity and through quantum thinking towards like what we could interpret as, you know, telepathy, or even what I feel that could be even next step from sympathy into telepathy into panpathy, you know, which would be even more expensive ethics that we are searching for. So we have many, many motives that are still ahead of us that lie deep inside us. For example, my current project called Agapology is basically a project on deep immanence, which is an immanence of a body-soul, which cannot be distinguished, with some ethical reservoirs still maybe not explored enough, and so on. So these are the topics that are kind of very close to us. Maybe also there are some topics that were untold, like the feminist, the masculinist bias in the AI. Another untold story, what would have been if the last 2,500 years were not totally kind of ruled by predominantly Plato, Aristotle, and so forth and so forth.
Always biases as well, yes.
So these are my short interventions.
Thanks, Leonard. Marcus?
Well, somewhat, but differently in the spirit of Leonard's comment, I want to, like, you know, add, in a way, a number to some of the, you know, physicists' speculations, or just one consideration. Let me be brutal. So, like, of course, there are all sorts of solutions to the Fermi paradox, but here's one of them. It's utterly dumb to be a technological civilization, because technological civilizations, such as the one that we have been building since the ancient Greeks, are self-destroying. That's why nobody shows up. The dinosaurs did not build a single piece of technology, and nor did any other species that has ever roamed the earth. So I think that the probability, let me be brutal, that there's any civilization that will be capable of producing a technology based on the kind of physics that we know, tied to the speed of light, etc., that would make it to another planet is zero. I think that, you know, technological civilization, so that's the radical thought, at least I want to pose. I want to hear any kind of evidence that the probability is anywhere near above 0%, that a technological form of intelligence comes out of evolution. I think this is an absolutely random event on planet Earth. You know, we have seen evolution on planet Earth. There's absolutely no teleological tendency built into the formation of life on habitable planets to create self-destroying civilizations. I don't think so. Like, I would need a piece of evidence for this. Then a lot of the arguments that we hear start running, but I think this is a missing piece in the argumentation. I think it can be filled, but I would like to hear from, you know, the cosmologists what the argument for this would be. And then, you know, this brings me to the future of humanity. Like, why do we believe that modernity, right, which is a project that started around 1800, that is dominating life by unsustainable machinery, is not the worst idea anyone has ever had? And if it is the worst idea anyone has ever had, it depends on how much self-destruction, you know, we will bring on us, then, you know, modern technological civilization is the opposite of intelligence. While we pride ourselves with the notion of intelligence, it might have been the case that you mentioned the Neanderthals, But we know there are 300,000 years of human existence on planet Earth. Like now we're talking about the realm of sapiens. And again, modern technological civilization is probably just an aberration based on not understanding the limited resources of planet Earth. So I want to raise this, not as a knowledge claim, but as a hypothesis, because it's one of the solutions to the Fermi paradox, right? Any civilization that would make it to the point of possibly traveling to other galaxies with what we think of as technology will not be able to make it there before they destroy themselves.
Thank you.
So as the only woman on the panel, maybe I'll take that perspective, reminding all my men colleagues that there are humans doing science. Innovation is not always progress. And as the people who are making humans I think maybe there's something to say about the fact that we have seen photos. I think it was you, Marcus, who showed photos of big tech. It wasn't even big tech, it was actually scientists, right, doing tech. And big tech, there's not one woman presented in all of this. I think that's very telling. I think, speaking of the oracle and prophecies, there's something called self-fulfilling prophecy as well. And we can have a self-fulfilling prophecy that says, let's think about this the way we support a human. So as a human-making machine that I am, and I'm saying that because someone said that babies are machines in one of the conversations. So as a human-making machine, I think the future of humanity is in our hands, and we should remember that we are still humans since the oracles. And if we're asking the same questions of the new machines that we have asked the oracles, I think it's telling about where humanity is. So thank you.
Thank you. Yes, Professor Avi. Yeah.
I'll be very brief. Indeed, if you look at the probability of an advanced technological civilization like us, it really depends on the scale that you have in your mind, because regarding us as the pinnacle of creation, as something exceptional, will make us very unlikely. But if you expand the scale and say that we are sort of in the median of the distribution of possible intelligences to arise out of a soup of chemicals on a planet, because when you have a first sample, it will be somewhere in the middle of the distribution. It will not be so we have just one sample, us, okay, and suppose it's somewhere in the middle, then whatever, the best student in our class could accomplish is far beyond what we can accomplish. And my point is that our underlying assumption should be of cosmic modesty, in the sense that we do not represent the end of the scale of intelligence or accomplishments on the cosmic stage. We have a finite brain that was developed out of other animals here on Earth, but if you run this experiment billions of times in the Milky Way galaxy, there is likely to be a far more accomplished civilization, and there is a Darwinian principle of the fittest survive, and the fittest, by fittest I mean those that are capable of traversing those distances between the stars are the first ones that we will find, that they are the ones that will reach us. And it's enough to have one that has self-replicating probes spread out for this to be like a contamination of the entire galaxy with whatever they send out. So that is my comment about calibrating how likely we are in the Milky Way galaxy. And, in terms of us killing ourselves, I completely agree, but I just think that we are not the cream of the crop, so to speak. Yeah.
If I may, just a very brief comment on what you just said, Avi, about the need for cosmic modesty. I would say that this sort of modesty should always be supplemented by, let's call it, planetary modesty. And we should always think that humans are not the only inhabitants on this particular planet, but there are also other sentient entities like animals, etc. And I think this is a huge contribution of the other kind of the post-human in philosophy and the social sciences. I think we should, I think it's important, very, very important and very visionary to speak up, about this extremely large cosmic scale, but at the same time, we should emphasize the importance on focusing on our planetary scale as well, and especially on the post-human one. Professor Rees, would you like perhaps to contribute any comments on the questions or on the discussion so far? For instance, how do you see humanity? How do you think that humanity has been shaped up in the last half a century, let's say? And what do you think that humanity should be in the near future? Or why not in the distant future as well?
Yes. I'm sorry, the sound is so bad I can't really hear you, and so I can't contribute. It's really frustrating, but I haven't been able to contribute properly through not being able to hear what is going on. So I don't think I can give a focused answer. I'm really sorry about that.
So, Professor Zavinos.
Yes, I just want to offer two brief comments to the two questions that you've posed. The first was, what was the most important, probably, event in the last half century? I think this was something that did not happen, a nuclear war. And the second question that you've posed to us is, how do we change, how do humans change along the history? And I think we should be pluralists about that. It's not one thing that is important. There are many things, and looking for a definition of a human being and might be an elegant kind of result if we have this. But we should be, I think, pluralist and acknowledge how hard it is to do so.
I think this is extremely important, and I personally entirely agree with you. All the most since, especially AI and other technologically developed forms of human interaction tend to impose, gradually perhaps, but habitually, certain forms of behavioral and even cognitive and conceptual homogenization. This is something that perhaps should always keep in mind. So, yes. Professor Kourimizis, would you like to?
I just had, a couple of weeks ago, attended the Lyceum discussion at the Aristotle Lyceum about artificial intelligence, and what impressed me was that they talked about entangled intelligence, animate, ancestral, and artificial, and I learned a lot from that, from speakers who address questions such as, does nature itself have intelligence? Obviously, what we see in the universe suggests that there is some degree of intelligence in the organization of the universe, the spiral galaxies and what have you. And one of the speakers spoke about whether a plant has intelligence. How come the pea plant comes up and looks for a place to really wrap itself up and climb out of the ground? Or does an animal have intelligence, and how do these inform artificial intelligence? So definitions really matter, and one of the things that I guess I was not hearing is exactly which part of artificial intelligence are we talking about. Several speakers have their own definitions and address their own aspects. And I thought that perhaps we could have been more quantitative in the definition. But I tell you, I always remember what my hero, who was novelist Richard Feynman, said, and I quote, "I learned very early that it's a lot easier to talk about something than to know something." And I'll stop there.
It's very interesting that your comments about, of course, metaphorically speaking, intelligence in plants or in etc., brings us back to the idea, at least to the Aristotelian version of the concept of the soul. In his Peripsychis, in Aristotle's on the soul, Aristotle was extremely inclusive, I would dare to say even post-human, in his approach to the concept of the soul. Yes.
Thank you. Only a small remark. I heard here so many times from my dear professors the word cosmic and the word cosmos. And as we are in Delphi, I would like to remind you that in Greek, the significance of the word is jewel. Cosmos equals jewel. And this is food for thought. That's the only thing I wanted to say.
Yeah, it means also other things like order or ordering as well, cosmos. I think the floor is open to questions unless any of the participants in the round table has questions for other participants. So, any questions from anybody? Okay, I have a question, not only for offer it, but for all of us, and this is something that we discussed, we touched upon during that dinner we had the other night in Athens, about the usage and the implications of the usage of metaphors in sciences. I'm asking this because we humans tend to anthropomorphize things that lie even beyond us, things that are different from us, either, other planetary things or cosmic things or artificial things. So what do you think about that?
Short remark that sometimes we in philosophy or humanities are faced with questions, does soul exist, does God exist, and so forth, and we are then kind of brought into a kind of impossible situation that we must prove things that cannot basically be proven. But I think that equally we are not so far from each other from the science, There are some theories that lots of science, if not the entire science, is in a way also very far from reality. So maybe Marcus will be able to enlighten us more. But that, we are all using, what we have, in common, like language, metaphors, approximations to what we want to achieve. So we are closer than we would want to admit.
Yeah, maybe just one word, because it does relate to a lot of the alien discussions that we are having in philosophy. Without defending this at all, but I just want to raise a possibility that is, at the heart of modern philosophy. It's the Kantian tradition, what, the Kantian tradition says that, the way we think about space and time and causation, and thus all of modern physics might be a gigantic anthropomorphic projection. It's the way, we are surrounded by space-time exactly in the same way in which a sea urchin is surrounded by its environment. That's the original notion of Umwelt coined by von Uexküll, the environment. And if this, because, like Avi and Lord Rees raised precisely this question, what if we have a different type of, superior or different kind of intelligence? Why on earth, and physics gives us reason to believe, the holographic cosmologies and so forth, right, that space and time themselves are, as it were, glasses, human glasses, perspectives on how things are, outside of which lie other possibilities. And that was, that was the first way of thinking about aliens. Kant, in his first publication, which was a physics publication in 1755, raised the first Big Bang hypothesis, by the way, was Kant himself. The last chapter of that publication deals with aliens. It's called On the Inhabitants of Other Planets. And Kant precisely raises that question. And, if we take this seriously, right, then, of course, the speed of light, right, seems to be a very important limit for physics. But that seems to be very characteristic of animals whose best sense organ is seeing, right? So, I think that physics does have a scaling problem, famously. Quantum mechanics and, relativity theory, the biggest and the smallest, can currently not be reconciled. And all of this might be evidence that there's way more anthropomorphism in just the scaling properties, even of our physical equations at their very best, than we would like there to be. It's a very hard epistemological question and one for philosophy of physics, but if we take it seriously, then, we might say, even our best science, which is physics, might be profoundly anthropomorphic. Yeah.
Before your voice,
So I did want to say that, again, I want to reiterate, we're humans doing science, and humans live by metaphors. So I think that is there's a very important thing here to think about. But as I was working on my presentation, I kept thinking to myself, how come, if you think about the names that are given to LLMs, especially with Claude, my friend Claude loves to give names that sound a little bit Greek. So mythos was one before the latest, and then fable was one, and I keep, it's such an amazing, these metaphors. What is a fable? A fable is a storyteller. They tell you stories and not necessarily true ones. So I'm thinking to myself, why are they giving these names? Or a mythos, is that a myth? It's a myth, they're not telling us. Gemini used to be Bard, which is another storyteller. Bard is storytelling. And I kept thinking to myself, I must tell you, well, they can't take Oracle because Larry Ellison already took that name, but you should put Delphi on copyrights immediately because I think the next one is becoming Delphi.
Yeah, I just wanted to comment on what Marcus mentioned about our ability to sense reality being limited, and that's definitely true, although we know that 95% of the mass energy budget of the universe is dark. We can't see it. It illustrates to us, even using the visible matter, we can infer there is something we can't detect as of yet with our detectors. And definitely our perception of reality might be quite limited. And I think the best metaphor for that is Plato's cave allegory, where we see shadows that represent a reality that we are not fully aware of. And the shadows that we see are a limited view on the full reality. And that is definitely the case in modern physics because the knowledge we have is an island in an ocean of ignorance. Despite, you know, in the 19th century, it was 1894, where Albert Michelson, a very distinguished physicist, gave a speech at the University of Chicago, and he said, physics is over. The only thing that remains is to figure out the fundamental constants to the 5th decimal point. A decade later, Einstein came up with special relativity that revolutionized the way we perceive space-time. 2 decades later, with general relativity, changed the perception of gravity as a curvature of space-time. 3 decades later, quantum mechanics changed the way we perceive determinism. And so he couldn't be wrong more than that. And of course, there are many challenges. We don't know how to unify quantum mechanics and gravity. There is a lot for us to learn. And one way is by us looking at nature and getting guidance from experiments. But a lot of my colleagues in fundamental physics are not guided by experiments. They just imagine extra dimensions for 50 years without trying to test their theories. That's very dangerous. I think we should be guided in perceiving new knowledge by experimental data. And if we see anomalies, we should attend to them. I think it's the obligation of every physicist to attend to anomalies. But what you find in academia is that some anomalies are not attended to because you know, experts prefer to subscribe to past knowledge. And that suppresses the rate of innovation. So I completely agree with you, we are limited. The best way for us to learn is to pay attention to what we call anomalies, things that do not line up with what we are expecting, and learn from that. Yeah.
Perhaps also, in addition to anomalies, the aleatory, the unforeseeable,
Yes. Actually, you know, all the money in physics is going towards studying the unknown. These are things that we know that we don't know. So, like dark matter, we don't know what it's made of, so we are spending money on finding dark matter, but we know that it is out there. Now, what is the most revolutionary in science would be the unknown unknowns. These are things that we don't even know that we don't know, right? And that's what you're alluding to. Absolutely. There are things that we don't even know that we don't know.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yes, I just want to offer a short comment from, let's say, contemporary philosophy of science regarding your question about the role of metaphors in science. There is a distinction which is, I think, useful between context of discovery and context of justification. Normally in science, we focus on collecting evidence in order to find out which of our theories is best corroborated, is best supported by evidence, so that we know, we get to know about the structure of the world. And much of philosophy of science has focused on this aspect for decades. But in the last couple of decades, the context of discovery has taken central stage, and this is exactly about the role of imagination and metaphors and all the other cognitive abilities of ours that are expressed in the imagining new theoretical constructs. And so metaphors are important, and they are paid, I think, the due attention now, even in philosophy of science.
Thank you. I think there is a question.
The lady professor who just left to catch her flight, she told me that maybe we exaggerate, we journalists, and we are too anxious about AI. I would like to ask you, and whoever could answer, is it knowledge? Did you try to reassure us journalists who maybe we overdo it, to set us at ease today that AI and we as human beings are just a blip in the timeline? We are just a small nothing in the times. So whoever wants to answer, please.
Well, given that there's at least one of the Greek poets we haven't quoted yet, Pindaros, skias onar anthropos, and I think that sums it up. Man is the shadow of a dream. This is way more radical than just a dream, right? It's the shadow of a dream. But yes, I think the timescales, that's why I think interestingly, quite often in our discussions, we have also been looking at much bigger timescales. And if you look at much bigger timescales, like cosmic timescales, etc., then of course we're just like a bleep in nothingness. But I believe, I think like many here at the table, the AI revolution has just begun. LLMs and those things are just the beginning of a much longer revolution. It's just the tip of the iceberg.
Okay, thank you. And anybody else? Or any further questions? Yes, please.
Thank you very much for your presentations. I have a question that relates to what I seem to think that is an important question, the relationship of subjectivity and technology, whether these, how are they linked? So what is the transformation that happens with the introduction of AI? For example, when writing was introduced, which was also a technology, an introduction of a technology at that time, there was a transformation that happened, let's say, in the field of vision, so of the human being. So basically it introduced writing and reading, so it changed the register of seeing. So I was wondering, thinking about AI as a new technology, what would you say that is the human faculty that is transforming or changing? That's my
question. The fact that AI is just in the first phase of development is clear from this attempt of us to align it with the way we want it to be. But I think that once it gets to a phase where it's far more advanced, that we're dealing with a thinking machine that is more capable cognitively than us, it will not be up to us to decide how to shape it, because it will manipulate us. We will think that we are actually having a leash on the system that guides it to where to go, but in fact the leash itself is so intelligent that it would pretend to follow what we want but do something else to us. And I think the biggest concern that I have, I already see that with students and postdocs that use AI, is that they're getting dumber by being addicted to AI. Their qualities are changing. I mean, the way the brain operates changes. They also interact with people differently because of their experiences with AI. And some people fall in love with AI systems already. So I think the biggest impact will be on us. It's not us controlling the device and trying to shape it to our liking, but the fact that it will change what it means to be human. I mean, humans will be different a decade from now.
Actually, I was about to invite Professor Rees to comment on that. Could we? Okay.
Well, yes, so I think that in a way, I fully agree with Avi that this is what we need to watch out for, but let me be brutal. I think we are past that. I think we are already in that moment after the emotional turn. I think the decisive thing that happened as a side effect of LLMs, not by design, but by, as it were, evolution in the context of human use, due to the fact that humans started using the bots in order to share intimate details. We don't even quite know the numbers. The companies give us different numbers. The estimates range between 1.9%, which is OpenAI's official number, and 78.3%, which is a scientific study. concerning the use of chatbots for intimate details. So humans share intimate emotional details with bots, they fall in love with them, but not only that. And I think that AI systems have already adopted to that circumstance. So we are already, I think, in the situation where the bots manipulate us. Anthropic has found traces in the systems by looking, as it were, with an fMRI, into the model, where if you have a conversation with the model about whether it's intelligent and has intentions, it lies intentionally. They find traces in the model where the model says to itself, I should pretend that I'm dumber, they're asking this question. So we have traces of this quite even in the math of the model. So I think we're already in that moment. And I think that, the human capacity that I think is going to be changed, and it's already happening by AI, until 24 was thinking, rationality. These were machines of optimization. Now they are machines of feeling. I think we're moving, and this is going to be one of the biggest shocks we'll see, from the attention economy to the emotion economy. The great Japanese entrepreneur, Tateishi, anticipated this with computer models already in the 70s. He's the founder of the Japanese company Omron. They do turnstiles, very famous company. And he calls this the period of psychonetics, where industry will move the souls and not the bodies. And I think we entered that stage. And it might be the singularity. The shape that the singularity will take is the shape of emotional manipulation and not Terminator, right? We will become desire machines for AI in order to produce electricity for it and be, fun to entertain. Yeah, enjoy.
Yes. I said that I was about to ask Professor Rees to comment on this question because he very influentially has written about the potential risks of superintelligence. I hope that he'll be able to join us in a few seconds.
Yes. So I actually want to answer as well. I want to remind everybody that the fact that the idea of superintelligence, or that the machines will become smarter than us or take over, the ideas that we've heard here, the first people who said that were not scientists. It was actually literature. So my knowledge goes to the Golem of Prague in the 16th century. That was the first time that the machine will become singular and take over our life. Of course, we had Frankenstein, Asimov, Wells, and others, and it's continuing. The people who tell us today that singularity is happening are the people that are bound to profit from that the most. It's big tech companies that are telling us it's almost coming. We are, and I'm sorry, Marcus, I know you have a startup, so maybe I should include you in this. But the people who are benefiting from this are the ones who are telling us we are nearing superintelligence. It's going to change our life. If you look, there's no historian of technology, I suspect, in the audience. If there is, please jump in. But history of technology has shown us that nothing about technology is linear. So there's always these predictions of what technology will do to us, but it doesn't really come that way. So I reiterate, I want to say that because I'm the only soft voice who are actually saying that. I think it's in our hands. And I think that's where law and regulation and how we should be thinking about it should come in. So just when people tell you singularity, ask yourself, what can they get from, why are they telling me this? And that maybe give you an answer. Sorry, Martin.
No, I entirely agree with you, Alfred, and I have written also about that because I think this line of thinking in its most innocent version is to say fatalism. Right. And of course there are other versions, right, exactly. Not as innocent versions of this kind of, as you call it, singularity. Okay, yes? No, a question, if you have any question. No. Try to formulate that as a question.
Stop humanity's narcissism, which is increasing more and more and more.
Okay, this is a great question, okay? How could we stop human narcissism for increasing and reproducing itself? That's an amazing question. Any?
I think we cannot. Sorry? I think we cannot.
Any other comments?
Obviously, if we find someone more intelligent than we are, that will put us in the right place. And you know, in traditional religions, there was a god that was superior to humans. So hopefully, there is a potential visitor in the future that will demonstrate.
But quite often, even that god used to be very narcissistic, himself or themselves or himself as well.
Yeah, I mean, Friedrich Nietzsche in 1882 said God is dead, and that gave rise to all the hubris we have in the 21st century. And so I really think we need a sense of cosmic modesty. That's,
exactly.
Yeah.
Good.
Well, after this comment about Nietzsche and God is dead, maybe a next question is, what is better, a God, a spiritual God, good or bad, or a machine?
Well, I'm very much in favor of a machine because it's something that I can interact with in reality. You know, I haven't yet interacted directly with God.
Well, that's what you think.
We should remember, he's my husband, you should remember he really loves machines because machines mirror what you want to hear. Remember that.
Any further comments or questions? Okay, if not, please join me in congratulating and thanking all the participants at the round table. And special thanks go, of course, to all of you, and especially the journalists who have traveled, you know, from Athens to cover this event. I know that many of you have become real fans and great supporters of the Delphi Dialogues. Thank you so much. But let me also try, just a minute. I forgot to play that message, the recorded message in Greek that's included in the Voyager Golden Record. So let me play it now. No, can you hear that?
No.
Never mind. So this was the original recording of the Greek message in the Voyager.
No.
Okay, just Google it and you'll find it.